Hello, everybody. My name is Janet Sheriff. I am the moderator of today's webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. Today, we are doing a presentation by Nuclear Fuels. That's symbol NF on the CSE. And today, our guests are William Sheriff, who is the Executive Chair of Encore Energy Corp. and the Chair of Nuclear Fuels, and the CEO of Nuclear Fuels, Mr. Mike Collins. We're going to walk through the presentation. There is a tab that allows you to take questions. So please add them through. And at the end, I will come back on and field the questions to our guest today. So with that, I'm handing it over to Mike Collins. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you, Bill, for being here as well today. All right, so our first slide is actually our forward-looking statement, and it says cautionary language that you should review. There's a copy of the presentation on the website, and I would urge you to look at that. But when we talk about forward-looking statements, we're talking about risk management, and I think what you'll see with this company is actually how we've worked very hard to de-risk projects as we brought them into the company and brought it public. We're an ISR, or In-Situ Recovery, focused uranium company. We've got some very exciting projects in Wyoming in the Kaycee district of very significant scale. Key focus is to move the Kaycee project forward into a production path through a unique development model and a joint venture arrangement that we have with Encore Energy. We also have a number of other projects that you'll see today that are similarly valuable in ISR and also in conventional uranium exploration. We've got a great team as well that you'll see that is very capable of bringing this company forward. Okay, our next slide looks at the cap structure of the company. We have about 46 million shares issued and outstanding, 46.5 or something like that. We have no warrants out at all. We have, I think, a little over 2 million options issued to staff, directors, and consultants of the company. And we have about $6.5 million in the bank. So we're very well financed to execute the programs that we have both for this year and for next year as well. So very tight structure, very focused ability to move the company forward. I should mention Encore Energy is a 19.9% shareholder of our company, and that came through the vending in of two significant assets. And as well, management is heavily invested in this company as well. So we're there with our shareholders and focused on building value. And we're also all very much escrowed. Bill Sheriff is here with me today. He's our chairman and was a key founder of this company. We have a number of other individuals on our board and our management team who have a depth of experience in the uranium business. David Miller, Wyoming-based businessman, very strong understanding of the permitting processes and how things are developed in Wyoming. Gene Spearing is a geologist who has spent an awful lot of time actually working in the Kaycee district. He wrote one of the best summaries that was done on that a while back. I actually worked in the uranium sector in the last cycle in conventional resource development in Four Corners, Colorado, Utah. Larry Lahausen, record of discovery. These are all really strong individuals. Mark Travis cut his teeth in the last cycle and is probably one of the younger but more experienced explorationists out there. So great people to have on board. Next slide, please. Bill, maybe I can hand this off to you.
This company, just a bit of background as to its formation, it was well over a year putting this together. A lot of efforts and thanks go out to a lot of staff to get it finally to the the finish line, both at Encore and with Uravan and of course with Mike's group at Nuclear Fuels. Encore, a little bit about Encore. We're dedicated 100% to in-situ production. We built the leading staff in the business domestically, especially for that. And all of our projects that we're spending our money on are, quote, in the production pipeline. So along with that, having access to the world or the largest domestic proprietary database in the US, we come across a lot of quality projects that we aren't going to advance to production, or certainly not without a great deal of exploration, as is the key with the Kaycee project in particular. Most of the time, we just deal with these during the course of regular business as non-core asset dispositions. Our conventional assets we're doing. In fact, there was a news release today about a deal where we sold an asset in New Mexico to Anfield, took a very large, roughly 20%, 19% interest in the company as well. So this is a model of value creation for Encore. What's so special about nuclear fuels is the project, especially the lead project, Kaycee, was so special. We didn't want to just hand it off and send it on its merry way with another company. We wanted to build a team of established experts and really move this forward because we think it's the best exploration project by far in the United States for uranium. Mike will go into a lot of the details, but when you look at it's over 100 miles of established roll fronts. Only one company's ever really consolidated the district and moved it forward. It's on the west side of one of the most prolific uranium producing basins in the country, that being the Powder River Basin in Wyoming. And essentially has seen virtually no exploration and certainly no coordinated large scale exploration since the 3 Mile Island days. So it's a bit of a hidden gem. And that's what got us so excited to take the time to actually create this company. And we actually have sold the property to Nuclear Fuels, as we did with Moonshine as well, and Boot Heel. But importantly for both companies, we maintain a 50% back-end right, 51% back-end right to the Kaycee project. After quite a bit of exploration work's done over the next couple of years, if they're successful, Nuclear Fuels, that is, and getting a 15 million pound resource. And we're optimistic that that's in the realm of certain likelihood, given the size of the system. Then Encore can elect to back in for a 51% interest by paying 2.5 times the exploration expenditures incurred by Nuclear Fuels and advancing the project to production. And carrying Nuclear Fuels to production. Of course, that'd be recoverable from production, but it provides Nuclear Fuels the unique situation of being the only small ISR, a relatively small ISR company with an outstanding project that actually has a means to production. And that is really a highly distinguishing mark and just shows our commitment to seeing this project through and see what happens. I think it's going to be a pretty exciting time.
We should also talk about a couple of other projects we have. We're down here in Arizona at the Moonshine project on the northern border, almost in Utah. We've got a very strong historic resource there. We have potential to expand from that core historic resource. We also have we have a conventional project that we inherited from Iravan Minerals, which was our RTO partner in Utah, another ISR project, Boot Heel, south of the Powder River Basin in Wyoming. And then we've got some very interesting targets up in Labrador, compelling high-grade uranium showings that were never followed up, discovered in 2009. So we're pretty excited to be getting after those. And it's also a very exciting heavy rare earth district, which is valuable and something that people are very much looking for these days. All right, so if you look at the key map there on the right hand, well, on the center, we're sort of in the middle of Wyoming here, in the Powder River Basin. The Powder River Basin and Wyoming as a whole has been a core area of uranium ISR production since the 80s. Powder River Basin, we've got Irigaray Christensen Ranch, which are owned by UEC, North Butte, Smith Ranch, Highland, Cameco ownership. Nichols Ranch, I believe, is owned by Energy Fuels. That's their one ISR project at this point they've been holding on to. We're on the west side of the basin, and quite interestingly, we've got, in terms of the volume of our land, you can fit a number of those projects in. And within that, we can see, as Bill commented, we've got over 100 miles of identified roll front. And, as a rule of thumb, a lot of companies will expect to get about, 1 million to 500,000 pounds on the low side per mile of roll front within a production target area. So this gives us an exceptionally large area to work with, and it's almost more difficult to narrow down what we really want to chase. We've got 3,700 historic drill holes to guide that work. The vast majority of our land is private surface and public subsurface, which gives us an advantage because we can move very quickly to drill significant acreage. Whereas if you're working on straight BLM or National Forest Service ground, you've got a 5-acre limit. So you don't really get a lot done in a year if you're doing 5 acres, rehabilitating, and then reapplying for permits. So we've got this opportunity to run very quickly and aggressively to chase resources. One of the interesting things about Kaycee, you'll see in the bottom here, historic resources, 500,000 pounds at 0.38. This is about twice the grade of the average producing ISR mine in the Powder River Basin, which is about 0.07, 0.08. So we've got higher grade material, so more value in the ground, and the ability to build more pounds on a shorter trend length of roll front, because we're packing that uranium into a smaller area. So you get more value for your drilling as well in that type of an environment. Zooming out a little bit, you can see the scale of the Kaycee project compared to these existing ISR permitted operations like Gary Christensen Ranch, Nichols Ranch. You can fit 2 or 3 discrete 10 million plus scale projects within our boundaries. And it's a lot of the work that was done here was just scout drilling that identified these roll fronts in the last cycle. Really, the last significant work that was done here was in the late 70s and early 80s. The last uranium cycle in 2009, the land package was really fragmented and broken up, so no one really did a lot of work here. And that's left us with the ability to gather up pretty much the entire district, and the ability to pick our targets, as opposed to being left with what we could get when other people are also competing for ground. Again, we've got a situation where Encore really likes this project, so they've maintained a back-end right for 51%. One of the things that this really allows us to do is focus on being explorationists. If this was standalone and we were really focused on trying to move it forward into production ourselves, as we progressed it, we'd be spending a lot of time looking for production engineering people to work on it, and bringing in a permitting staff and other things. So having Encore on the side, cheering us on, allows us to focus on being exploration company and doing what we do best, and doing it as quickly as we can. A little cross section that talks a bit about the geology. We have 3 target formations in the Powder River Basin: the Wasatch, Fort Union, and Lance, and you can see they get increasingly deeper. In the center of the basin, the sediments are flat-lying, so it's really only been economic to drill and produce in the Wasatch. Where we are on the western side, the sediments are tilted up, so the vertical section is, or the formation section is kind of shortened. So we can drill vertically through 2 to 3 sections, 2 to 3 formations in some places, hitting multiple targets in vertical. So much more efficient and effective exploration, quicker, better use of dollars, and the ability to make multiple discoveries with one hole. So it's a pretty good opportunity in that sense as well, compared to the rest of the Powder River Basin. I think that's probably the only place where we can do this. Here we are at Moonshine. We're down to Arizona. This is a pretty neat project. Again, we're looking at historic resources with really high grade. So 0.16 versus the sort of standard production grades of 0.07, 0.08. Generally, the cutoff for producing uranium in ISR environments is about 0.02. So we're looking at really high grade in the context of in situ uranium recovery. It has been tested for ISR amenability and proves up on that. We've got an awful lot of additional potential to expand these resources. Significant portion of our targets for expansion are on state ground, where we hold the state leases, and those leases easier again compared to BLM ground to be able to permit and quickly drill resources. So we're looking forward to getting involved in this, and we're actually looking for other historic data that we think is out there that will help us bring in additional historic resources and bring those up to a qualified 43101 standard. Our third project really is Labrador critical metals up in southeastern Labrador. We have a very significant land package here. It's actually an interesting combination of quite high grade uranium, sort of 1 to 6.5% historically. Those samples were taken in 2009, and at the time, they were surprised that they had gotten the grades they did, I think, but there really wasn't a whole lot of interest in funding uranium exploration in the day, so they never followed them up. So we're on the ground there now, sampling and chasing those things up and looking to do, instead of grab samples, but doing channel samples and trying to get the sense of the scale of the project. In terms of the rare earths, we're sort of, our ground is tied fairly closely in with Search Minerals, where they've developed a PEA level study on a heavy rare earth project, and has quite enviable, I think, economics in terms of NPVs and internal rate of return. As you can see, they're moving towards a pilot level study on that. We think we can find similar grade material, and what we're actually looking for there in terms of rare earths is to find very high grade material that could be mined in small mining environments with a faster permitting timeline and a lower capex to make it more reasonable to bring it into production relatively quickly. So we have a couple other assets that we could talk about. We've got roll fronts in sort of southeastern Wyoming as well. This is the Boot Heel project. It's got some historic resources. This is lower grade material. If we were talking about 1.38 and 0.138 and 0.16 grade material, but although this is lower grade, it actually has really good production kinetics. Effectively, the uranium is easier to remove from the sedimentary rocks and cheaper to do so. So the cutoff here would be significantly lower than we'd look at in a standard ISR project. So where are we going? Real focus on Kaycee. We've compiled and digitized our 3,700 drill holes, actually. We are in the permitting process to get a drill on the ground there very, very shortly, and we're looking to be producing news there relatively quickly. One of the great things about ISR uranium exploration is we're using gamma logging to identify and qualify the grade of mineralization, and that happens essentially on the same day as you drill the hole. In conventional and uranium exploration, you take a rock sample, you put it in a bag, you ship it to a lab, and 6 to 8 weeks, if you're lucky, you get a assay back from them. So our turnaround time and our ability to follow up on initial results is a day-to-day basis at Kaycee, as opposed to conventional, where you're looking at coming back in 3 months. Moonshine, data compilation, additional data, looking at permitting, drilling on state leases. Labrador, as I mentioned, we're in there doing sampling right now. Very excited about what we're seeing. but of course needing assays to validate what we're looking at. But beyond that, maybe Bill, do you want to pick it up here and talk a little bit about what we're doing to expand on our projects?
The comments I want to make really are just emphasizing Kaycee. I mean, these are all quality projects. Moonshine should advance rapidly. For those of you that are into geology, it's in the Chenalee Formation, so we've got some pretty good grade there. Same thing with the Lisbon Valley project we inherited. Did know one question coming through on Lisbon Valley. It's deep. It's the extension of the Lisbon Valley mine that Rio Algam ran just to our north there. A quality project, but certainly it's going to need higher uranium prices. And as a result, that and being conventional with not much hope for ISR, it's at the bottom of our list for the time being. Wouldn't even be surprised to see us farm it out at some point. But the Kaycee project is just really what's got us all so terribly excited. I mean, you've got, we already know from previous drilling and previous limited testing that the Lance, the Fort Union, and the Wasatch all are amenable to ISR in the project area. And in the immediate area there, the cross section that showed, Mike was quite right, it's all in the Wasatch. But if you go other places, go up northern part of the Powder River Basin, the Lance is productive there. If you go down further south, you see the Fort Union's productive. And virtually all uranium production in Wyoming, with the notable exception of Lost Creek, the vast majority of the uranium that's come out in the last 30 years has been out of the Powder River Basin. And that's where the bulk of the resources remain, and certainly the concentration of production plants there. So it's to be able to have essentially one entire limb of a huge basin that's known to be uranium productive, and we've got roll fronts identified. It's really an explorationist dream to be in there looking at it. So I think obviously nuclear fuels, it's going to be a major propellant for them. And at Encore, we certainly watch, and we'll be glad to see the progress of this coming along.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Bill. So I guess actually there is one thing I neglected to mention about Wyoming, and that is it's a proven permitting jurisdiction where you've got a number of ISR projects that have been brought up to economic standard and taken through permitting and into production, and they have the manpower and the knowledge, the I guess you call it corporate knowledge in Wyoming State to receive a permit application and be able to process it effectively and quickly without needing to learn the process. And so they have confidence to be able to value permit applications. And half of the problem in our business is uncertainty on the permitting timeline and how things go. And we don't see that so much in Wyoming. There's a lot more knowledge on the permitting side that makes a real difference in how projects go forward.
Well, I might also add it's one of only two real significant ISR states that are agreement states, and that is basically, in short, agreement state means you don't deal with the feds. And dealing with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is just a time sink, and it can go on for a decade in some instances, although not typically. But dealing with the state timeline of Wyoming or Texas is where we've concentrated all of our efforts. There's a reason. It's a whole lot friendlier and a whole lot more streamlined process.
There you go. So to bring it all back around, why would you want to be investing in nuclear fuels? Because we've assembled a great group of projects in key ISR districts. Kaycee, I think, is really quite exceptional. That's what got me excited about getting involved in all of this. We're fully funded. We've got the right people to lead the company as well as the field exploration. We've worked with Encore on developing other exploration opportunities, and there's a bit of an agreement there. William, do you want to speak to that in terms of proprietary data?
Yes. As I mentioned briefly on the startup, Encore has exclusive access to the largest proprietary database in the U.S. And as such, I mentioned there are a number of criteria that are pretty high threshold for Encore to be involved with, but nonetheless, we come across very good and interesting exploration properties. And there's the opportunity for nuclear fuels for a nominal royalty to take over on some of these projects that are identified through the database that are not of sufficient size or advanced nature for Oncor to benefit nuclear fuels, and at a very reasonable rate, obviously contingent upon some production at some point for those royalties to pay off. But that relationship should benefit nuclear fuels tremendously.
Yeah, and that's really exciting for us as well. So very pleased to be able to continue to work with Oncor Energy in that way. So to bring it back around, pathway to production through proving up 15 million, minimum of 15 million pounds uranium resources and reserves in Wyoming. And really, this is all supported by growing demand for domestic US and Canadian uranium production, and also the increase in demand for nuclear power. And as part of the green economy, we've seen some very bullish statements out of Ontario with both conventional reactors as well as small modular reactors being put on order this last week by Ontario Power. And that's not an isolated incident. This is really the future, and that's what we're looking to see.
Here's a question, Mike, that came up that I think is a valid question, that there's some confusion between nuclear fuels and Oncor Energy. And I'll try and go over that one more time. Oncor Energy is strictly dedicated towards taking extremely advanced projects that are essentially production ready, putting them into production. As such, we built up an elite team of engineers and professionals that are dedicated towards production. There's an awful lot of projects that go through an awful lot of work before they ever get, if they ever get to the production phase. So rather than Oncor spending tens of millions of dollars on exploration, when it has a healthy pipeline of at least 5 projects to go into production over the next decade, it just doesn't make sense for us to do the exploration. We've got plenty on our plate to put into production. So the opportunity for a company like Nuclear Fuels is not on the production side. It's in the exploration side. They take a property without a known mineable economic resource or developable resource, and they build it up through exploration. They spend the money on exploration, proving it up. Once it's reached that size, then Oncor may wish to get involved, and in the case of Moonshine, back in for 51% interest for 2.5 times the exploration expenses. So you can look at the two companies as very different. Oncor is a senior advanced production-oriented company. Nuclear Fuels is an aggressive exploration company. So there's a big difference between exploration and production, and therein lies the very distinct difference between the two. And management of Nuclear Fuels is independent of Oncor. Oncor is just a very large shareholder. Hope that answered that question.
It's Janet Sheriff here, everyone. Thank you, Bill and Mike, for the presentation today. I want to go into a few of the questions. This one is for Mike. When do you expect to see a US OTC listing?
That's always a bit of it usually takes a couple months, but I can tell you this. When we finally received approval for our listing at the CSE, I politely waited a day before I rang up our corporate lawyer and said, okay, let's get going on OTCQB. Let's do this. So we're aware that we need to do that for our US investors, and we're aggressively pursuing it. So
perfect. Thank you. And there's a question on Lisbon Valley. And Bill, I think you indicated that you would take this question. It was about when will ore be produced, or where will it be processed at Lisbon?
Yeah, here again, I touched on it. Lisbon Valley is a very high-grade district. We're on the eastern side of the downthrown anticline. As is the Lisbon mine from Rio Algam, just to our north, that operated for a number of years underground. The question there, of course, is depth. The ore grade is very good. You know, typically the Chenley formation, the Mossback member there runs 0.25% to 0.3, sometimes as much as 0.4% U3O8. But the simple development cost of something at the depths that we're encountering on the east side would require a higher uranium price. As such, it's not a priority for nuclear fuels, and as I say, it may very well go on the block for some sort of consolidation in the area. But I think we haven't done the economics on it, nor have we done enough drilling. It's an early stage project, but if you were to find an ore body there, you'd certainly need, I think, something on the order of $90 or $100 uranium to justify your capex at those depths. Granted, we do probably see that price coming, but in the meantime, we've got far more economic opportunities in front of us.
Thank you, Bill. Mike, you mentioned permitting as a competitive advantage in both ISR and Wyoming. It's my understanding it's 7 to 10 years to permit a conventional line. Do you have a timeline on permitting for in-situ recovery operations in Wyoming?
So historically, you're looking at 2 to 3 years to permit a mine and 1 additional year to build a mine. It's actually relatively quick to build an ISR production facility. You're looking really at a small tank farm and a well field. The beautiful thing about ISR is there's very little surface disturbance. There's no big open pit. There's no tailings pile. So you've got it's relatively quick to put these in place, and it's not the technological issues hurdles are very low. You're not dealing with a lot of the issues around metallurgy and things like that you see in conventional extraction.
Okay, thank you. I have another one continuing on that. The arrangement as an exploration company, the options for an exit strategy on projects are limited. You have an interesting opportunity with Encore when you get to 15 million pounds that they would have the right to take that to production. How long do you think it would take to get to 15 million pounds 43-101 resources?
That is the real question. We would love to see that happen in the next 2 to 3 years. We think that's a potential opportunity to get there. So that's our focus. And every day we get up and like, how are we gonna make that happen? So it's our focus.
Okay. And what would your news flow look like in the next, say, 6 months? Always a question that everyone asks.
Yeah, absolutely. So really, we're looking for relatively early results from Kaycee, as well as building on what we have going on at Moonshine. There's just an awful lot of potential to bring that resource into compliance, but we see the ability to expand on that relatively quickly by drilling and potentially through data purchase from other parties. So that's a pretty good spot. We should be seeing results this summer from Labrador. We've actually been doing work there since February. We did a very innovative Skidoo-based uranium survey using scintillometers. Very cost-effective ground survey, and a lot faster than walking and a lot more accurate than flying it. So we've been trying to bring these projects forward as effectively and efficiently as we can.
Thanks, Mike. I one last question that I don't understand, so it's a bit technical. Is there a calculation to equate 0.02 ISR into pounds per ton conventional?
Do you want me to pick that one up?
Yeah, we can tag team it or pick it up. Just run with it there, Mike.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but there's 2,200 pounds in a metric ton. So if you have 0.02, that should equal about 0.44 or half a pound of uranium. Is that about right, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, here we go. This is an international discussion. So being in the US, make it a simple mathematic. 0.05% is 1 pound per short ton. And the math all works out the same. It's just easier starting with 2,000 pounds instead of 2,200. But
Yes.
and it does mean the same. So when you look at ISR grades, you're going to see things. Most of the resources in the US are typically in the 0.06% to 0.075, 0.08% range. That is typical in most of your reports you see. There are outliers on both ends. In fact, most of Encore's projects are greater than 0.1%. But here again, grade isn't everything in ISR as it is in mining. It's certainly helpful. Obviously, the more you start with, the more you're going to get, because you'll never get all of it. But other factors in ISR are equally important, such as permeability, porosity, how quickly you can move the fluids through the rock, depth, because drilling is one of your big expenses. So while you don't have the CapEx expense of putting a conventional mine in fact, ISR is really not mining. It's actually much more akin to oil and gas, which makes the permitting easier. Your grade is important, but it's not an overwhelming, singular important factor like you see in conventional mining. It's a matrix of factors. But yes, the actual conversion, when you see 0.02, 0.05%, it means the same thing on both sides. That's the amount of uranium that's in the ore. And 0.02 would be, for 4/10 of a pound per ton.
Thank you. I have learned a lot today. I have one last question, unless anybody wants to submit any further questions. And Bill, this one is for you. Assuming exploration success at Kaycee, do you see that as a potential feeder into Encore's Gas Hills project?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's proximity is about equidistance between Gas Hills and Dewey Burdock in South Dakota, and both of those are our leading third and fourth projects in the pipeline at Encore. So, it's way too early to say which would go into, whether it would go into the Dewey Burdock project as a satellite or into the Gas Hills, or whether in fact, if it's 15 million pounds, that it might not in fact be the center of the operation. It just, a lot of things are dependent here. One of the biggest ones is how quickly things, materialize, and certainly a lot of that. In fact, the question is premised with the thought that we will achieve the 15 million pounds plus at Kaycee. So lots of work to do between now and then. It's certainly an interesting question and speculation, and leads to a lot of opportunity.
Well, thank you both. I don't have any further questions coming in now, but I do have a nice note from a colleague in Wyoming telling you to keep up the good work. So thank you to Bill and Mike, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. Your time is valuable, and we do appreciate your time and your interest in nuclear fuels. This is being recorded, and it will be shared on social media if you want to check into it later. So any further questions, our contact information is available, info@nuclearfuels.energy. And with that, Mike, I will just let you have any final thoughts.
Well, I'd just like to thank everyone for taking time out of their day to listen to our story. We think it's very exciting, and I hope you'll continue to follow it. And yeah, it's just a great place to be. Really excited to be with us. Thanks, Janet.
Well, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week.